Christopher Blevins has been a rising star in the sport of cycling for many years, and he's now a star shining brightly on the world stage. In 2025, he won 9 World Cup races and was the UCI Men's Cross Country Series overall champion, scoring over 300 more points than his second place competitor. He's been a dominant force in short track for several years now, and now he's showing he's got the goods for the 90-minute stuff as well. As a fellow American, mountain biker, and overall fanboy, I am stoked to see Christopher at the top. I interviewed him a few years ago leading into the Tokyo Games, and there was so much wisdom in that episode from such a young athlete. I wanted you, our audience, to hear that message again, or perhaps for the first time if you've joined us recently. Originally, I was going to reach back out to Christopher and see if him and his coach, Jim Miller, want to come back on the podcast. But I think there's some beauty in listening to Christopher from 4 years ago to tell his origin story about how BMX racing set the groundwork for higher level cyclocross, road, and eventually cross-country mountain bike racing. And how his love of creating music is not only a balance to all of the racing, but a similar channel of flow that can unlock aspects in all of us for joy and happiness. The original interview was over an hour long, and please feel free to go back and listen to the full thing. It was season 2, episode 60. But for today, I've shortened things down a bit to focus on his story, some training tips I think can apply to everyone listening, and of course, Christopher's advice in life. So sit back and enjoy my interview with the newly crowned cross-country World Series overall champ, Christopher Blevins. We're talking with the youngest guest we've had on yet, and you'll quickly learn that this rising star is now shining brightly on the world stage for mountain bike racing. Christopher Blevins has won countless national championships in multiple disciplines across the sport, from BMX to cross-country mountain bike racing and cyclocross. He's won some big races on the road too, like the 2016 Peace Race, which is arguably one of the biggest accomplishments a junior cyclist could achieve. He also won a silver medal at the 2020 U23 Mountain Bike World Championships, which is a feat that I don't think we've done on the men's side since 2001. And currently he races for the Trinity Racing UCI mountain bike team and has been named as the sole member of the U.S. men's Olympic team to represent the United States at the Tokyo Olympics. Christopher, it's an honor and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me and for making me feel young. It's not so often with how many fast juniors there are coming up in the States. I'm starting to feel like one of the old guys now. So
yeah, you kind of are, and we have a huge wave coming. And what's kind of cool is, I think you know this, but like you were at the tip of that wave, and I think that a lot of the young riders out there and some of the young riders I work with, it's, they look up to you and what you've been doing, and that's created the wave. So
yeah, it's exciting to say the least.
So where you coming from today? Where are you at?
I'm in Arco, Italy, on the northern tip of Lake Garda. It is, I've never been here before, didn't know what to expect, but I can say, honestly, it's maybe the favorite place I've ever been. I've been,
Really?
Fortunate to go to a lot of cool places with my bike. Something about, maybe it's, Italy and the whole world opening back up from COVID a little bit, and kind of recognizing the vibrancy of this place and the Italian culture. But man, it's so cool and such good riding.
So some of the quick overview here, like I said in the intro, is I want to learn more about you, Christopher, and I want our listeners to learn more too, because there's more than just like bikes and bunny hops and stuff going on here. So could you tell our listeners a bit more about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into where you're at?
Yeah, of course, I'm from Durango, Colorado. Very proud of being from Durango because it's such a special community, and I'm the product of a number of like incredible youth cycling groups, and chief among them is Durango Devo. But I started not on the mountain bike. I started with BMX when I was 5. There's an ad in the local paper, and my dad took me to the BMX track, and BMX tracks are kind of just total playgrounds for kids growing up, and that's why there's so many young kids that are BMXers racing nationally all over the country, and I was one of them. And that was my introduction to to the bike and racing at a high level. I was really serious with BMX all through elementary school years, and somewhere along the way, mountain biking and road were added to the mix, and then those two became the sole focus. And went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo for college. Actually graduated officially just a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's weird with, just closing your computer and calling that the end of college, but such are the times. But now I'm, it's new chapter, I guess. Sole focus right now is the Olympics, and after that, I'm a college grad, and we'll see where to go. But
yeah, exactly. More chapters after that. Tell me a bit more like BMX. Why did that resonate with you? Like when your dad brought you down and you just started playing. Like what hooked you there?
Yeah, I mean it's simple. It was just how fun it was, and my dad reminds me pretty often after my first race we traveled to. I think it was in Salt Lake City. It was a national race there, and I mean, it's a simple thing, but on the plane home, I was just like, Dad, that was fun. Let's do it again. And he's like, I always remember that moment. And I was like, yeah, son, we're going to do it again. And, I mean, my dad and I went, like, my mom and sister. My mom kind of stayed home with my sister, so my dad was traveling with me the most. But I've never counted, how many Holiday Inns we stayed in around the country and livestock arenas we raced BMX in, but it's in the hundreds for sure.
Wow.
So it was quite an adventure growing up, and really special to have that that high level of focus and community, even though it's an individual sport. And then BMX was the introduction to like the racing and the competitive side of it, and I think that kind of planted or really lit a fire in me, and kind of built that competitiveness that each athlete needs at this level, really young for me. And the counter to that was Durango Devo, and kind of a more adventurous side.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's unique is, right, in Durango, not only do you have all the trails and all the outside to ride in and stuff, but Durango Devo and what Chad has created there with the culture, and also just a bunch of off-road athletes living there and creating careers there. I mean, you're at the epicenter of riding bikes.
Totally. I mean, yeah. Chad and Sarah Tesher, the co-founders of Devo, like I often think, especially recently, like the impact that one person can have in their community, and starting a youth riding program like that has alumni, in winning Grand Tour stages with Sepp Kuss, and the Olympics now twice with Howard and I, and also like in the industry or coaching kids and all over the world. And it's just really special. What Durango Devo is, and kind of the ethos that it operates on.
Yeah, it's right time, right place, and your dad and mom and even your sister putting in the hours of getting you around the country. So it's a really unique community and situation to allow you to do what you do. So it's I wanted to like portray that for people.
Absolutely.
The opportunities that you've had.
Yeah. It's I think this, especially reflecting now on making the Olympic team, it's like it really is the product of all of these people who've influenced me and given me opportunities that I was truly fortunate to have in right time, right place. And obviously there's a ton of work, but with everything of, achievements of this magnitude, there's 1,000 people in tiny moments that add up to it. And I mean, it all started with BMX and Durango Devo.
And just kind of portray that development, because there's some young developmental riders that listen to this podcast and stuff too. So, I mean, you went from Durango Devo to the whole athlete program, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And from there to the Hagens Berman crew, where you were racing on the road. And tell me a little bit, just like, because I saw you racing on the whole athlete program when I was directing a team here in the United States. I saw you there for a bit. And then, we didn't see much of Christopher Blevins because you were racing on the road so much. So can you tell us a little bit about what made you move from whole athlete to Hagens Berman?
Yeah. Well, Whole Athlete was, I think like Whole Athlete had a huge impact on so many athletes. And like
Yeah, it
me,
was.
I mean, my college roommate, my best friend, Anders Johnson, I met through Whole Athlete. One of my best friends and, high school girlfriend, I met there. And then Haley Batten, who I'm, going to the Olympics with and teammates with on Trinity, as well as Kate Courtney. We all came through Whole Athlete, and
Yep.
the level of, like, I think, excellence and professionalism that Whole Athlete had, it was really unique and a great time for athletes that wanted to be serious about the sport, like learning how to be professional and train really well. And that was huge, and it was, like I said, great timing for our developmental stage. And then, I had a good connection with Specialized as a junior since I was racing on the NCCF Specialized Junior Road team based out of the Bay Area with Larry Nolan, another fantastic program, and then Whole Athlete as well. So that Specialized connection, along with, I guess, my piece race result on the road, helped me have a call with Axel Merckx. And I wasn't sure I wanted to continue racing the road in college, in my first couple of years U23, but it was a dream to race for Action that I had since I was like 13, 14. And Axel allowing me to have the freedom to race mountain bikes along with road was too good of an opportunity to pass up. And I'm really grateful I said yes to racing on Action, because it was, stellar team. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's the foresight of what Axel has there is just recognizing how to manage you and give you the options, because clearly there's passion for both road and mountain. Right now you're on the mountain mission, and there'll be more chapters to come to, I'm sure.
yeah, and I think I was still like, it was only what 3-4 years ago um, when I was first year U23, 4 years ago, but like that was still early for kind of the cycling industry to consider these roadies that also race mountain bikes, or mountain bikers that also race road. And now it like is starting to feel like the norm, or like a hidden kind of advantage that can can hopefully help develop more Matthew Vanderpoels or Tom Pidcocks. So from a strictly training perspective, the mountain bike mixed with the road, mixed with cross, can develop you incredibly well, and be very versatile, both in how you race and how you respond as an athlete. And I think Axel recognized that mountain biking was not going to do harm to my road, even though I missed a few starts. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it, and that's the developmental aspect of the athlete. It's like which bike, all the bikes, and
Yeah.
you definitely do that. And I think a nod to your current team too. I mean, Trinity Racing. Tell us a little bit more about that, because they're far reaching too. I mean, they've got athletes on all disciplines.
Yeah. This year with Trinity is kind of it's in some ways like the inception of a new team, and it's really exciting, kind of, yeah, like you said, the far reaches that this team has already, and how it'll continue to grow. A very solid, young road team with a lot of good Brits, but an American with Luke Lamperti, who just won Pro Crit Nats. And
Yep.
for me personally, I'm not sure if I'm going to race any road this year, but I have the opportunity to do so with Trinity, which was really intriguing. And then cyclocross, I'm 99% sure I'm going to give it a go at the World Cups and Cross Worlds this year. And, Trinity offers the experience and know-how and platform to do that. So it's an exciting team to be a part of, and I think grow with.
No, I like that a lot, and it's interesting to be able to interview you and have our listeners hear this. Like, how does a rider develop with all the bikes, let's just say that, and in perform at such a high level? So I guess from the training side of things, if we go back to BMX, can you tell our listeners, like, what are the main differences in like how you prepared for BMX racing versus cross country mountain bike racing?
Yeah. I think, people who aren't cyclists at all, or, uh, you know, watch the Olympics maybe and see cycling as a discipline, and they assume that riders could do both. But that's like thinking, I mean, essentially Usain Bolt could beat the best marathon runners. And that's the difference in BMX from a training perspective. It's like a 35-second race and incredibly chaotic and dangerous, exciting. But as a kid, I started lifting weights pretty young, like at 12, and it was all functional stuff. And then I never got that big. And that's kind of why I realized in some ways, like my body type is better suited for the endurance side of things. And I want to keep my body, intact and not have like 13 surgeries by the time I'm 30.
Exactly.
But I was doing a ton of sprint work, goes without saying, and then a lot of work in the gym. And I know that's the formula for all of the elite BMXers. I do think though that and this applies to track racing as well, they are starting to realize the benefit of training with volume, even though they're sprinters, and go on some road bikes and suit up in the chamois. It just builds a healthy athlete.
I was just going to say, which is really exciting because it adds in like so much health component to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think that, maybe that was an advantage to me in my later years of BMXing, which I stopped when I was 16, but having a full focus on road and mountain, maybe, it was more of, in some ways, it was an advantage than a detriment to focus on the endurance side of things. But it's certainly, BMX from a skill standpoint was huge and foundational. And then also from a mental side of things, like when you're getting ready for a 30-second BMX race where the first 2 seconds determines your whole season, really, like you got to be so locked in and have that resilience. And, I definitely think that has helped me when it hits the fan, for sure, in road racing and stuff. And working my way through the pack, I learned that all through BMX. So it's a great sport for young kids, and it will lead to it will if you escape it, and you head to the mountain road. And also, like, I love the BMX world and the community, but it's different.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's way different, but that's kind of my point for listeners who don't know maybe anything about BMX. It's just like the metabolic demands are drastically different than cross country mountain bike racing. However, those technical skills and those high risk situations, that's translatable. And I think that's what I see in you when I watch you race. Is just like that technical proficiency and focus when shit gets crazy. Like, you got that. And it's pretty fun to see, and so I have this question on here, and it's, what type of rider would you describe yourself as, like, to our listeners out there, to better portray like the type or style of riding that you do?
Well, I mean, I'd say, at the risk of sounding like I'm avoiding the question, maybe, like, I am an all-arounder. And even when I was on the road, like, I had a couple solid TTs. I was never going to be a Grand Tour GC rider, but I could climb up the longer stuff. I was the lead out guy for our sprinters on Action, and even had a couple sprints myself. In XCO, I mean, XCO is essentially a time trial for an hour and a half, and you can't really it's more you in the terrain than it is you and the competitors. But I am really good at starting, and if I'm starting fifth row, like, I can get myself to the first or second row by the end of the start loop, and I think that's a huge skill, and that does implore the BMX skills of the punchiness and the the tack to move through the pack. Courses, I think that's a good indication of the type of rider I am, and I like steep, shorter climbs, so something in the under 1 minute range. But fast, dry descents are kind of typical of growing up on the West, so prefer those over the wet, rooty stuff we see so often in Europe. But and then if you throw in a couple pump tracks and jumps, then then I'll really be loving it. But we don't get that all that often.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I say that a lot too, in terms of cross country mountain bike racing. It's a technical time trial with a hard start.
Yeah.
And if you're coming up the ranks like you have been, and you got to negotiate moving through people, but I think that's where that, the bike handling skills and the anaerobic training that you had early on, I mean, that's showcasing through now. So, but yeah, it's interesting to hear that background and as it applies to today. But yeah, you're all arounder, making chapters as we go here. So, you mentioned Durango Devo and how influential it was, to your development, but to the training side of things, can you describe like when you moved from BMX to that Devo team, like what kind of volume were you doing? Was it intervals? Was it racing? Was there structure? Like what did they have you doing?
Yeah. I mean, Devo was famous for like intervals being like a bad word, and like we were allergic to intervals, and that's special. But at the same time, we had monthly telegraph time trials, which is 15 minutes if you're really fast, 20 minutes was really good as a kid, and 20-minute climb in Durango. And Howard forever had the longest time, probably still does. And everyone was cheering at the top and built little tunnels that human tunnels that you'd go through. And it's like, what a cool way to get kids stoked on pedaling hard and seeing what they're made of, without them realizing that they're training like that. And then of course we'd have little town sprint races on the road bikes and stuff like that. And then I should mention also weekly short tracks that Chad designs the courses, and they're always just so fun. And then I was in a unique position because I was racing BMX like so seriously. Like at 12, right? I had already had 6 national titles, and was like a veteran in the sport at that time, like 6 years of traveling, and had a routine, and like was training really hard. Like I don't know what the hours were, but it doesn't fall too short of what I'm doing now. So Devo was really like no structure and go ride your bike with your friends. Sometimes it'll be hard. Sometimes you'll show up and play foot down in the parking lot. And that was really healthy. I don't think I would have, quite gotten to the point I'm at so quickly. Like for instance, one piece race when I was 18, if I didn't have a coach when I was 15 and start training a little more structured. But in the case of like a Howard Grotz or Sepp Kuss, they had the natural talent and just went on these crazy long adventure rides. And then like by the time they were later in their junior years or in college, they were like, yeah, okay, I'll do this seriously. And very quickly, went to the very top of the sport. So they're rare cases and exceptional athletes, but sure. Yeah, the mix was essential for me.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point there is like, because you came at it at such a different angle, so focused and so intense, like early on, I think, the pendulum was in one direction, and Devo made that pendulum swing a little bit more and kind of gave you that balance, or that the fun factor you needed to balance it all out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a testament to the power of, community and training. And
that's it.
Like you can go out and bang your head against the wall on an interval day all by yourself. And there's something special to that. And there's something important about that, like learning to love that if you're serious about it, and learning to have that kind of intrinsic inner motivation to meet that wall and go past it. But at the same time, like find the community in the training partners, whether you call them that or just riding buddies, that you can go out and have fun with, and don't isolate yourself in your training plan to where you don't say yes to a fun group ride and don't really know how it's going to go, but it always turns out great. So that's a piece of advice I have, especially for young riders, is like leverage your community, or seek out the people around you that are doing the same thing as you.
That's sage advice. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Well, I know you started working with Jim Miller, and that's when your structure probably changed quite a bit there too. Can you talk about what you're doing a little bit before Jim, and then once you started working with him, and maybe even what the experience was going through that transition?
Yeah. I mean, I'd honestly say the structure almost went down in some ways. And I know, you've had Jim on, and I'm sure he's talked about like his philosophy of just building the engine and just going out and like honestly just busting your ass. So like structure, I wasn't accounting for every minute of the ride in a specific power zone, but the work went up for sure. And the volume went up, which I wasn't expecting because I was choosing to focus on the mountain bike at that time. And I thought that, I'd be doing 1.5 hour rides, like 2.5 hour rides. And now those are short. So when I had a few 4 hour days in a row with like high endurance, it was like, oof, this is grueling. And I think that Jim's philosophy really centers around that engine building, and it takes time. I mean, building fitness year in, year out, like will continue to stack the pyramid higher on your form, and I think that's where I'm at, and where I'll hopefully continue to see those gains. But transition was mid season. I kind of realized, I wanted to change and just to see what I was capable of with a higher workload. And I remember before, I sort of alluded to this just a second ago, but before Australia Worlds, my first year under 23, like I had a few 4 hour days, and I was like, damn, like Jim, why am I doing this? And he's like, volume builds fitness. And I was like, all right. And then I had one day I went, if Jim listens to this, maybe he'll remember and laugh about it, but I certainly remembered. I had a like 4 hour ride, and I did 3 hours and 40 minutes. And, I think this was after I had asked him why he had the high volume a month or so away from world champs. And he says, 20 minutes short is 1.5 hours a week, which is, 5 hours a month, which is, 50 hours of training block or something. And I was like, man, am I like on this prison sentence of doing it? And but like now I'm at a point where a 4 hour endurance plus ride, which is that high level of endurance that you can just kind of uncomfortable all day. Like I really love those days, and I'll go out and pick this epic ride and just bust it out. And it's funny how your perspective of that and your perspective of what's hard changes the more you really settle into it. So took some adjusting, but yeah.
That's it entirely, and it takes time. But once you have that fitness, I mean, when you're fit, everything's more fun, including those long, sticky, tempo rides like you're talking about. But what Jim's coming from, and I share a similar mentality with him. But it's like what he's doing there is 20 minutes short on one ride. You do that over the course of 7 days, it starts to add up. You do that over the course of 31 days, it really adds up. And I did a podcast with Steven Seiler, and he talked about kind of that long-term approach to developing an athlete. And it's not only the long rides, but it's like a bunch of those long rides strung together over time to build that engine and get that pyramid nice and wide so it can go nice and high. And it's and volume does build fitness, and then eventually hone it down to get that performance, which is where we're at right now.
Totally.
Yeah. So
it's often, just to speak on that, I think, and I'm sure Steven Seiler would say that something along the lines, as far as my limited understanding of his philosophy, like training is a lot more simple than people often make it. And, you still need incredibly smart people like yourself and Jim and Steven, leading the athletes. But you just kind of got to put your nose to the grindstone sometimes. And then as you get closer to the event, understand what output you need for that, and hone it in a bit closer.
Yeah. And that's it. And I think training is simple in my head. Human physiology and human psychology is complicated.
Very true. Very well said. Yeah.
And getting the athlete to have buy-in and getting them motivated to do the work, that's the art of it. And when you can do that, when you have somebody like Jim or Steven that can motivate the athlete in intelligent ways and sift through the BS that's out there, because there's a lot of BS. And I think that's what makes the strategy complicated, or deciding on a strategy complicated. That
very true.
Most athletes, they want the secret weapon or the magic pill or something like this, and it's just a bunch of work. Good rest and get it done, and then have some good timing.
So, yeah, totally.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. So, kind of coming back to, you alluded to it a few times, but like when you started working with Jim, you hadn't decided necessarily to go laser focus on the mountain bike for the Olympics. When did you make that decision?
It was pretty early on talking to Jim, and he was an advocate of it kind of from the inception, like when we started working together. Um, that is
About
like,
how long ago was this?
yeah,
Sorry.
this was 3 years ago, I want to say.
Yeah.
But like, I've told this story a few times in the past month, but I had a sticky note on my wall freshman year of college, which was 2016, that said Tokyo. So like, I've had this on my mind, dream since I was a kid, but past 4 years, I really realized like I could do this. And it definitely had a lot to do with my decision to leave action in 2019, sorry, and just focus on the mountain bike. So it was good timing. And at that time we were chasing points to try to secure 2 spots, and we fell a bit short. But yeah, Jim and I have had this plan and worked towards it for 3-4 years now.
We'll get into that here in just a second, but I guess since we brought it up, how did it feel when you heard that you actually made that spot?
Yeah, it's, goes without saying, it's emotional and really special. And I knew more or less like certainty that I had it, but still like getting the official call, like I didn't expect to actually get the goosebumps and feel it so strongly, even though I knew what I was going to hear on the other end of the phone. But yeah, it's an honor, and it's the continuation of the dream that kind of lives in the process, if that makes sense.
100% makes sense. And you mentioned that 2019 to 2020 year in the transition. I mean, we had a little pandemic get in the way, and still kind of, definitely hanging in there. How did COVID change things for you? How did it change your training?
Yeah, well, 2019 wasn't a great season for me. I had high hopes and fell a bit short. And a lot of it, I won't go too deep into this, but I think throughout that year, I realized like a bit more why I wanted to be a bike racer, and how I wanted to be a bike racer, and kind of the inner journey through that, and realizing like, yeah, I do want this and I want it my way. And it was an important, year of kind of that reflection to realize the purpose and smashing pedals and pursuing this goal. And I think if I didn't have those challenges in 2019 and come out of it with a bit of a renewed sense of purpose, I would have not worked as hard as I did in 2020. We're so fortunate as cyclists that throughout the pandemic, it was the best social distance activity you could ask for.
Yep.
We're so fortunate. And I was in San Luis Obispo and these beautiful roads and busting my ass. And I planned a mock grand tour of sorts. And it wasn't obviously quite the level of a grand tour, but it was like close to 30 hours for 3 weeks. And I do some creative things like bring out 5 guys, cat ones that had fresh legs on one day, and talk some trash, and then let them attack me at the end. And I was like the one who had to pull back every move. So, that was and then also as a bunch of pros did, like I went for a ton of KOMs, and I'd have one of those N+ days and have to steal like 2 20-minute KOMs throughout it. And it was so cool to realize like in training, you don't have to go on the perfect 5% grade, hill and meet your threshold and stare at your power number the whole time. You can do the same effort when you're kind of chasing a carrot, whether that's a Strava segment or whatever, some friends. So that's from a training perspective, how I work through it. And then later in the year, I went to Europe, had about a month before the World Cups, and one race in there, and to get my feet under me, and ran into Tom freaking Pidcock, and he showed us a lot. I think especially with Tom, for listeners who don't know, I'm sure you know what Tom Pidcock is at this point. But after he smashed Nova Mesto, and beat all the elites, I was like, man, can't you just hand me the U23 World Championships for real humans? But I say that obviously joking. Tom was by far the most, the most deserving that you can get. But long way of me saying the Worlds was a big goal in my mind, and a second place again. I had one in 2018, but a silver medal to Tom Pidcock was great. So that kept me motivated throughout the whole year because I had the feeling Worlds was going to happen.
Well, that's, I mean, a lot of athletes have had to recalibrate over that 2020 year, and it seems like you recalibrated pretty well to get that. But to go in a little deeper there, when you said the mock Grand Tour, what was yours and Jim's? What was the rationale? What was the goal of simulating something like that to the stresses of the body, to the mindset? I mean, why go so big on a year where there's no racing around?
Yeah, well, I mean, on one hand, it's a goal in and of itself. And if you make training camps their own achievement to work through, it nicely wraps it up in a little bow. And you're like, yeah, that camp that we called, whatever you want to call it, put a fancy name to it, make a Google Docs and like plan your routes and have your
hashtag Kate Epic.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have one.
The Blevins Giro. I don't know.
Yeah. There you go. I'll use that one next time.
Perfect.
But yeah, I had a bunch of point-to-point days where I had friends pick me up in Santa Barbara, like 120 miles down the coast, and really like got creative with it. And when you approach training like that and plan it beforehand, it is a lot more fun and you're a little more motivated. So that was one rationale. And then he has coached a lot of the World Tour guys and saw that any of the guys that were in their early 20s who had a World Tour in their legs just got a huge step up the next year. And by no means did I actually get a World Tour or Grand Tour in my legs, but I tried to the best I could. And that load didn't necessarily pay off like in the short term, but I think in the long term, continuous hits like that will start to stack up really well.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up, because there's twofold there. One is there's a principle of training called variability or variety. Mm-hmm. And as a coach, you need to stay creative, to add in variety, to change things up, to look at things in different ways, to stress the athlete in a different way. And, when I heard you guys doing that, I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's a brilliant way to do it. Right. And chasing King of the Mountains and getting segments and all this kind of stuff, really motivating way to do this during COVID. And the other thing is, spot on with a developmental rider, those who have more of the opportunity to ride and race their bike more in a functionally overreaching, or I would call it overtraining if you want, but get super tired over the course of 3 weeks. They come out a changed rider. And you read anything, you interview athletes, and after their first Grand Tour, if they survive, if they bounce back and still want to ride their bike, they're a changed rider for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah. The one obviously asterisk to throw in there, which I know, you were maybe going to say this, but is rest after, obviously. So
huge.
I really shut it down for a week and then rebuilt from there. But you can't do that all the time. So 3 weeks is sort of the maximum that you can go those 30-hour weeks with intensity. But gotta rest just as hard as you train.
Yeah, and that's the asterisk, and you alluded to that as well. It's like the gains in the short term may have not been as clear, but in the long term they will be, and that's just it. And I'm not advocating really anybody to do this on their own. Like if they listen to this, like don't do that on your own. Like make sure you got somebody overlooking your shoulder and giving you some guidance. But it's a very very effective way if you have all the tools in place to really make an overload. Well, before we wrap this up, I know balance is an interesting one for athletes, and you seem to find it off the bike. Tell me more about. I mean, you're done with school now, but you have a huge music component to what you do, and some rap and some poetry. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, it's a simple outlet and form of expression that's so different than being an athlete, and such a good balance. I actually recently wrote a little blog for a friend in his group he's got about that kind of poetic heart in the poetry process, poetic process, and how for so long I've thought of it as something that's so different than cycling that it balances things out. But in a lot of ways, I think that the art of poetry and the process of poetry and, digging into your depth and figuring out what you're made of applies just the same to being an athlete. And, there's a lot of room as an athlete to have a poetic heart and artistic mind. So, there's a lot of athletes with kind of quirks or hobbies that they have running parallel to cycling. And it's hugely important to keep those other sides of us alive. And that was also everything to do with why I picked to go to Cal Poly instead of a cycling school. And I wanted friends that didn't know the sport and who I could relate to outside of the bike. And that was huge. So the balance and perspective is the most important thing. I think the balance in doing everything at once is less important. I've realized, I think through the past couple of years of occasional scatteredness and running around like a chicken with my head cut off, that sometimes you only need to do one thing and only need to focus on Tokyo or your job or whatever have you. But keeping the balanced perspective is more important than a balance of action in a lot of ways. So understanding, what else there is out there and where it sits in the world and in your world is crucial. And music and poetry is the opportunity to reflect on that for me. And I've got my mini guitar here and I'm terrible at it, but I brought that in my bike case to Europe and I'm trying to get better. So
Nice. Yeah, I think again, balance is such an interesting one, and I'm glad you mentioned it because like we get out of balance a lot, and balance to me almost like doesn't exist, right? Because life it's a zoomed out time period when we're talking about balance, right? And there's these time periods where you're just severely out of balance, and then you swing back the other way to find this other balance in order to balance it all out to where you want to go in the end. And so it's interesting like that. And I was listening to a podcast where you mentioned, the rap and the music and the poetry being so separate from the bike. And I was like, man, Christopher, I think it's real similar, right? But it's like a different mode, right? The creativity and the flow states that occur in both. It's like very similar.
Totally. And I honestly just recently had that realization. So
interesting.
Yeah.
And I understand that you have or do work with some kids at a juvenile hall near Durango, kind of working on some of this poetry and stuff.
Yeah, in San Luis Obispo, actually.
In San Luis Obispo. Okay.
Yeah. I was a sociology minor in college, and that's kind of how I became passionate about, the human side of criminal justice, and had the opportunity to volunteer with this great organization and help run a creative writing program there. More often than not, we just sit and play cards with the kids. And I went a couple times this past year once it reopened with COVID, but haven't been able to have the consistency that's really important to build those relationships. But this is an example of choosing something that will widen perspective and choosing something that's important for, a development that has nothing to do with on the bike stuff and the development of humanity and what my own humanity and how I want to relate to people. So it's a simple thing, and it's 1 hour a week when I'm available to go in and talk to kids who may not have people believing in them, and just give them the time of day to play cards with them and be a resource, if they want to talk to you about stuff. So I'm also helping with a couple employees from Specialized, not affiliated with the company, but we're running a program at an adult prison in Salinas Valley. And there's this group. It's a maximum security prison, and there's a group that has organized to reach out to at-risk youth and try to tell them their stories and have an impact from behind the bars. So they lead seminars on, mistakes they made and development and how they can change the paradigms we have. So I write letters with a lot of inmates and have learned so much about, about so much. So that's been huge. And I'd love to continue to build those pathways and explore that, which, is obviously a world away from the bike stuff, but hugely important to me.
Yeah, that is so rad. I didn't know that about you just before this podcast, so that's really cool. Keep that going. That kind of inspires me to get off this microphone or get off the phone or out from a bike race and go do something different and get back. So,
well, thanks,
this
man.
is cool.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Man, well, we covered a ton today, Christopher, and this is a wonderful conversation. You're a fascinating human being, and I want to thank you again for taking your time to be on the show. I know you got big things going on, so we'll put a pin in it here just at the top of the hour. But my last question to you is, because like I said, we do have a lot of juniors listening to this podcast, and we also have people chasing their goals. So if you could give any advice to the young athletes, riders, musicians, or anyone pursuing their big dream, what would you tell them?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like to go back to what I said earlier about two things that are sort of different, sort of related. One of them is community, and, share the what you're going through with others, and live in that kind of gift that you're doing together, whether it's riding your bike or making music or whatever. But I think there's a lot of power in connection, and there's a lot of power to opening to other people and involving them in your process. And like I started the show with, I'm the product of so many people who help, provide me opportunities to get here and provide me love along the way. And, lean into those, be a resource for other people around you, and just go shred with your friends, And then other side of it, more personal, is slow down and take the time to reflect and to examine your why. And it doesn't have to always be some big kind of like foundational, deep philosophical examination of why you're doing something. Sometimes it's super simple, and you're doing this because you want that. But know your own reason, external of other motivations and other achievements you could get out there. And people know what I'm talking about here, but so often we forget to slow down, and we don't think there's more to life than just increasing it in speed. And we all need that reminder, especially now. So I know I do, but
I do too.
Yeah. But keep that alive in the sport, keep that feeling of why you got into it, and what you want to be as an athlete or whatever it is. Keep that alive.